Hi Dan, thanks for doing this. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Najib, it's quite a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I hope you have spent a good time in Morocco so far.
It's been fantastic so far, yes.
Excellent. Okay, before anything else, oh my God, you're an astronaut.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said.
I mean, 99.999% of human beings were born on this rock. They will spend all of their life on this rock and they will probably die on this rock. But you are among this very short list of people who went out there to space. How do you feel about it?
Well, I feel completely privileged to be given that opportunity, and like many people, I was completely surprised that I got chosen to be an astronaut because there are, as you say, so few people. So it was quite an honor to be considered, to be given the opportunity, and then to have a few flights. I feel completely privileged to be given the opportunity.
Yeah, and you not only went there to visit, but you actually lived in space, right?
Right. So on the space station, we go for months at a time, and so the pleasure of that type of mission is you go and live in space. That's your home. And so not only are you working every day like you normally would, but you get time off. And so, for instance, on Sundays, we have time off. And so I can sleep in, I can read, I can look out the window. The time is my own. And so that's the real pleasure of living on the space station.
And when you have this time off and you go to the window and you look on the planets, how does it feel?
Our Earth is so beautiful, and there are so many different colors and textures and shapes of our planet. And so when you're over Australia, things are a different color than if you're over Europe or over the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean or the small islands in the Pacific. Looking out the window is such a pleasure. And at night, you can see cities and you can see rivers because of the cities that are on the river. The Nile just lights up as it winds its way down. And so looking out the window is just fantastic. I could never get enough.
And you don't see borders, right?
The beautiful thing is you very, very rarely see political borders. And there are some times that you can't tell borders just because the river separates the border or something. But when you look down, you think of humanity and you don't think of nationality. You just think there are people living down there. Look, there's some fires over Africa. There must be campfires. Or wow. The cities of Europe.
You can see campfires?
Yeah, you can see some campfires. Because it's so dark, the campfires stick out. But you think of humanity, and you think of the people and their lives, and you don't think of their nationalities, and fortunately you don't think of their conflicts. You get to see the world as a whole, and that was very uplifting for me.
So it's one big rock populated by the species.
All people, for all people,
wow,
that's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The first time I saw time-lapse footage from the ISS was, I think, 10 or 12 years ago. Uh-huh. And I was mind blown. I was totally in front of the screen. It's really amazing. We will play some footage on the video. Let's do it now.
These time-lapse videos that they're sending down from the space station, they're spectacular, and I wasn't smart enough to do them when I was there, so I don't have any that I took myself. But when I see them, even though they're faster than real life, those are the images that when I see bring me back to space. I look at those time lapses and it brings me back, and I think that's exactly what my experience was when I was on the space station, looking out the window, watching the cities come. You can see the boundary or the shoreline come up, and now we're over the land, and now I can see the aurora borealis, or I can see a sunset coming up over the horizon. It brings up the same emotions that I had looking out the window.
The one thing that blew my mind really was the aurora borealis.
Yeah.
And another one was to see shooting stars.
And if there's a meteor shower, like there are a couple times a year, they're below you. They are between you and the Earth because those are entering the atmosphere and lighting up. So if you look really carefully at Earth, you can see some shooting stars or some meteorites, micrometeorites burning up below you, underneath
so
you.
For millions of years, humans have been seeing those shooting stars from below, right. And now we can see them from above.
Looking up and seeing them. And now you have to look down to see them. Yeah.
One other thing I'm really jealous of you for is, in Morocco we have some really good areas with dark sky.
Yes.
For example, in the Okemden mountain, we have actually an observatory. It made some really good astronomy discoveries. They discovered a solar system that is similar to ours.
Great.
That was discovered in Morocco, in Okemden. I went there and the night sky there is amazing, but I heard the night sky from the ISS is way better.
Well, because we have no atmosphere that we're looking through. So what's interesting is most of our windows are facing the Earth, because that's really the reason we have windows up there is to look down, and that's what we're most interested in. But there are a couple windows that look off to the side, and so every once in a while I will go to the window on the dark side with the sun behind the Earth and look out. And yes, it's I would say it's not much different than a very dark night here on Earth, but you can see a million stars, and you can see sort of the galaxy, sort of like you can here, but it goes all the way to the horizon and all the way up. It really is spectacular.
So we will now play footage of the space shuttle takeoff, because this is how you go there, right?
That's how I got there, yeah.
So all your space missions were with the space shuttle?
Right, I had 2 launches into space, one on the Endeavour and one on Discovery. On my second mission, I was on the space station for 4 months, and I came back with the space shuttle Atlantis that came and picked me up.
So let's see some footage of the takeoff, and after that you will tell me how was it like from inside.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Start, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond. Wait for Discovery's onboard computers commanding the main engine nozzles to swivel, aiming the shuttle for its precise target in space for main engine cutoff.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is. It really is amazing. So, on the launch pad, we're lying on our backs because the acceleration of the launch wants to be taken up by our whole body instead of this way, right? Instead of the blood wanting to go to your feet. You're being pushed into your seat, and so once you launch, you've been sitting in there for hours, and you're sort of getting anxious about going, and you watch the computer count down, and the computer's saying there's an hour and 20 minutes to go, and 40 minutes to go, and then finally you're within a minute, and then you can feel the space shuttle react, and it's activating, and valves are opening, and things are happening. You can hear noises, and when it gets to 0. And the solid rockets boost, boom, it's like you're being kicked off the planet. And it's a stronger and stronger force through your body as you're accelerating faster and faster, going higher and higher. And it's really exciting. Everything inside is shaking like crazy. And you feel the incredible force of whatever is, it feels like you're being pulled into space. And that incredible force, you just hope that it's being guided to where you want to go, because it doesn't feel like it's anything that you can stop. It's very, very a definite force. But it's great, and after 2 minutes, the solid rocket boosters come off, and then the 3 main engines continue to accelerate you, and now it's a very smooth ride, but then it presses you harder and harder to 3 times the acceleration of gravity. So it's as if 3 of you are sitting on your chest as you're being pushed back into the seat. And it's quite amazing. And we get from 0 to 28,000 kilometers an hour in 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes. So it's an amazing amount of acceleration, and it's fantastic.
And the rendezvous point where the space shuttle plugs into the
right.
space station?
We approach the space station, and so and when you're about 10 kilometers away, you can see it. It looks like a bright star. And then as we close in on it over about 45 minutes or an hour, of course it gets bigger and bigger. You can get closer and closer, and it gets to the point where when we dock to the space station, it's right there in front of our window, and it's just it's this massive structure, and we just drive up to it and connect with it. It's quite an amazing thing.
And then from that point you're floating, then you take off your belts and you're floating.
Well, so when we launch on the space shuttle, we launch and we're floating after 8 minutes. We get out of our seats, and it takes a day and a half to catch up to the space station. So we've been out of our seats. We've actually had dinner. We've gone to sleep, woken up, because the rendezvous, the catching up to the space station, takes about a day and a half.
Oh, a day and a half.
Yeah, so that's a completely different event.
Oh, okay. So let's clarify one thing for the viewers, which is the floating part.
Yeah.
Many people, they think that in outer space or in the ISS there is no gravity.
Right, that's a little fallacy.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
how does it work?
Well, gravity is a force between 2 things that have mass, and so you'd have to get very, 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 very far away from anything to have what you would think of as no gravity. But think of it this way: we do float in space, but we float even though there is a gravity field. So let's pretend like you and I are in an elevator, very tall building, and somebody cuts the cable on the elevator. Now the car that we're in plummeting to the earth. Okay, but you and I inside the elevator, you know what we're doing? We're floating. We're floating around, right? And we are having a fantastic time until we get to about the 3rd or 4th floor, and then things will come to an abrupt stop. What's happening is the space station and anything in orbit, a satellite, is falling towards the Earth, okay? Falling towards the Earth, but we've given it enough velocity, enough speed, so that as it's falling, it's actually going this way. So it's falling, and it's missing the Earth, okay? And it keeps wanting to fall towards the Earth, but it's going so fast it misses it every time. It's continually missing the Earth as it's falling. But that falling, whatever happens on the inside, is like us in the elevator. We're floating in it. And so, when we say there's 0 G in space, I try to make sure now I say there's no gravitational forces in space, so that maybe we'll start thinking about it in a different way. But being in orbit means that you're falling around the Earth, and that's the floating that you get.
Kudos to Newton, by the way.
Kudos to Newton. That's exactly right.
The cannonball experiment.
That's right. That's exactly it. The thought experiment of a cannonball. That's right. Always trying to hit the ground, but the ground keeps moving away from it. That's right.
Yep. Talk to us a little bit about the ISS. It's an amazing technological feat. How do you put so it's a football...
the whole thing is about the size of a football field,
Football field. In Morocco, if you want to give some references to the viewers, it's the same size of the Twin Towers in Casablanca. Have you been there?
Not yet, no.
You're going tomorrow,
I'm going to Casablanca tomorrow, yes.
So you'll probably see a couple of huge towers.
Yes.
They are 120 meters high.
Okay, great.
So that's roughly the ISS
Okay,
size.
great, yes.
So how do you take something as big as that and put it in orbit on space?
Well, a piece at a time. And the space shuttle has a cargo bay about 60 feet long, about 14 feet in diameter, and every piece of the space station is made to fit into that cargo bay. Now you think, well, hold on. Those solar arrays are enormous. Those are, I don't know what they are. They're about 50, let's say they're about 30 meters long. They're very, very large. How do you fit that into the space shuttle? They're ingeniously designed so that they started, when they launched, they were like a very thin, do you know a Japanese fan that fans out, that fan folds out? Well, this mechanism starts very small. It's just folded back and forth, and the genius part of it is what's called the mast. And the mast comes out, and it's stored in something about this big, but then it ends up about 30 meters long, and it gives the the solar array structural integrity. So everything was ingeniously designed so that it fits on the space shuttle, and it took, gosh, I don't know, it's probably 40 or 50 space shuttle flights to bring all the parts up to the space station to put it together, to make the massive station that we have.
So it was built part by part by part.
Part by part by part, yeah. And the amazing thing is, some of those parts were built in California, some were built in Italy, some were built in Moscow, and they all had to fit together, and they all had to work correctly when you put it together in space. So that was an amazing achievement.
Yeah, it's an international space station because it's an international collaboration.
That's right, exactly.
A lot
right.
of, how many?
16 nations. 16 nations collaborated, yes.
Looking back at the space exploration endeavor that mankind has been doing,
Yes.
so it's NASA, it's the space program of the Russians, the Chinese, and now more and more nations are joining the
Yes.
space exploration program. I mean, what we have done in the last few decades is crazy. We have
Amazing.
We have put this space station in space. We
Right.
have rovers on a planet.
Yeah, on the moon, on Mars, that's exactly right, yeah. Amazing.
So planet Mars has been seen as a deity for millennia, and people looked at that dot
Yeah.
in the sky,
Yeah.
and it was the god of war. And
right.
now we have put a robot
Right
there.
Right, exactly right. Several robots there.
Several
yes,
robots.
Exactly right. That is amazing, and we're going to go further. We're going to explore further, but you're right. It is amazing to think that we built something, and now it's driving around Mars, taking pictures, taking samples. Yeah.
And we have the Voyager, which has left
Left the solar system, both of them.
Yeah.
Now both of them have
yeah.
left the solar system.
And
yeah.
New Horizon is going to join them.
I know.
Soon.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yes.
What else? We landed on a comet.
That's right. That's right. Right. I know.
Are you kidding me?
Really. I completely agree with you. It really is amazing.
So where do you see this going in the next decade?
Well, so we will continue to explore outer space and to do things further away. But actually, I think the most exciting thing that's happened in the past 4 or 5 years is that satellites have satellites which used to be the size of a school bus, right, or a small car, and they took maybe 10 years to build and test, and cost millions and millions of euros to launch into space. Now we're figuring out that, instead of being a very big, very complicated satellite, it's smarter to make a satellite this big, 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And what I'll do is, instead of putting absolutely everything I can think of into the satellite, I'm going to have it do one simple thing. I'm going to have it take pictures, or I'm going to have it measure the temperature of the sea, the ocean, but with a sensor, or do something very simple. And I'm going to build it for, I don't know, 5,000 euros. And I'm going to launch 20 of them. And once their life is over in a year or so, I'm going to launch 20 more or 40 more. And so this shift of what we think of as a satellite is completely changing the industry. And now we have elementary schools, high schools, universities that are building their own satellites and then getting them into space. And now space is accessible to anybody. So I'm looking forward to the first Moroccan company that's going to build a satellite and get their own satellite into space, doing something very interesting. And so I look forward to that.
Yeah, I know of a team in a Moroccan engineering school who are just starting to work on this.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's the huge change in space exploration in the past 3 or 4 years. Now that we have fully operational, very small satellites that are doing very important work in space, and they're started by companies that weren't the huge aerospace companies. They're small entrepreneurial companies that were smart.
We are doing this on social media, on YouTube and on Facebook.
Yes.
And social media has been a great tool to push all these things, to let people know about all these things that are happening. It's a mankind endeavor, so everyone has to know about it. The one issue with social media is that it sometimes creates echo chambers. So there's this community of us who are passionate about science and who love this human endeavor. But social media can also create smaller communities that keep repeating things with themselves that are completely disconnected from what you're saying here.
Right.
So NASA, as a popular icon for space exploration, has been in the middle of this. So there's some crazy things about NASA. So, for example, some people believe that the Earth is flat.
Yeah, of course,
and
right.
that it's surrounded by mountains of ice, and
Yeah.
that NASA has helicopters,
Sure, right. Yeah.
watching the
Right.
the walls to prevent anyone from going there.
Yeah, you don't want people going over the walls, right? Right.
So, what do you think we should do about it?
That's a really difficult question because it's not only science. There are many, many areas of life that this is affecting. Not only science, but policy and politics and what people do and what people believe. So I don't know, but what I do know is that people have to admit that they're not the smartest people about everything. So I know nothing about medicine. I know nothing about cancer. And if I wanted to research cancer, I'm going to go find the leaders in the field who spent their lives studying cancer, and I'm going to actually take all their stories and I'm going to consider they know more than I do. And I'm not going to believe that I know anything more about cancer or whatever the topic is. And I would hope that people would do the same thing about the planetary system, and that it's sort of silly to think that you who didn't study planetary science for 20 years know more than the planetary scientists or the climate scientists or the whatever. And so I think there's a lack of humility about what we individuals really know, and how we should trust the people that have studied this for their lives. Now, maybe some experts say it goes one way, and some experts say it goes the other way. So now I have to think about who I think is more credible and who I think is more reliable. That said, people are going to believe what they want to believe, and I think a lot of time is spent yelling in the faces of people who don't believe what you believe, trying to think you're going to change them, and ends up all you get is two really angry and tired people. And so I wished people would trust science more and believe the science more, and I think that I believe that we will, over time, get back to a place where people respect scientists and respect the data and believe the data that's presented to them and what it says in terms of what that means, how to analyze that. Right now, we are in a bit of a crazy period where people claim that they know something or believe something, and as long as it doesn't affect other people that badly, that's okay.
I think most people still respect science a lot because the products of science are here with us.
Right.
That everything we do is using science
Right.
as products.
Right.
So I think it's just smaller communities that sometimes get to be very vocal and they're noisy.
Yeah, but people follow them and people listen to them, and so we'll have to figure out how to do that as a society. But you're right; it's very interesting. It's a very interesting time right now. What is truth?
Yeah. One last topic I want to talk to you, and it really blew my mind when I knew about it, is that you, after your career with NASA and as an astronaut, you went back to Japan to be a teacher?
Yeah. So I left NASA and I went back to as an aerospace engineer, and I worked in aerospace for a while. And then I have 3 children, and my children at that time were something like 10, 8, and 5. And I looked around and I realized my children were growing up in suburban America, and they were not appreciating that the world is much more complicated than just the little town we live in. And so my wife and I thought, wouldn't it be great if we can go live someplace else in the world to give our family and our children an experience someplace else in the world where the customs are different and where the way of life is different. And so my ancestry is Japanese, and my children were actually studying Japanese in their elementary school. And I went and visited the American school in Japan and fell in love with it. And so I tried to figure out, how can I get my family over to Japan for a little while? And so I started talking to the school there, and they were really gracious in entertaining the idea that I could come and help them by being a teacher for a while, being an outside influence or a different viewpoint in their school. And they were great. They let me teach a course called Space Science that I wrote and designed. I taught programming, robotics, stuff that I felt like I could contribute. And it was a wonderful experience. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. The hardest work I've ever done is teaching. I have a huge respect for teachers. It was the most rewarding thing, the most rewarding day-to-day job I ever had, because I got involved with these kids' lives. I felt like I was a part of their lives, and that was very rewarding. I miss my students. I miss being in the classroom. We've moved back to America since then, and now I'm with a nonprofit organization, so I don't see students every day. But I think that was a very important time in my life as a teacher.
Yeah, it's crazy. When you look at the educational systems across the world, you find that the most successful ones are the ones that value the teacher most.
Right.
So in Morocco, we're still navigating, trying to find our way to solve, many problems in the educational system. One of them is this: is to try to empower the teachers as much as you can. Do you have a message that you want to share with your colleagues in Morocco, Moroccan teachers?
Well, so one of the things that the American school I went to, that they did great, is they took a risk in taking somebody that is not an educator and that has skills other than teaching that could be used in the school. And I would love other schools to think the same way. Maybe find an established accountant to come and teach the basics of numbers to students, or a lawyer to come and not teach law, but to teach something that they're interested in. But they bring a different perspective and a wealth of experience that is just separate from an educator's experience. And so in that way, you can provide another perspective in the student's education. Plus, I think it's really good for the students to see, hey, that astronaut came and is teaching high school. And now when I'm hoping that my students will become successful, and I want them to think, you know what, now that I'm a successful businessman or surgeon, maybe what I'd like to do later in my career is go and influence the next generation. So I'm hoping that as an example, I will encourage other late career professionals to think about going into teaching, and influence the schools, or have the schools think, you know what, we can use a different perspective, and maybe we can have this established doctor come and teach biology 101. I think that might be I think that would be a good thing for everybody involved.
That's really amazing. Well, Dan, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's really pleasant to be talking to you and meeting all of your followers here.
All right. Wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Najib. Bye-bye.
سلام، أنا إكرام. السؤال ديالي بغيت نعرف واش يمكن الإنسان العادي يمشي شي نهار كسائح للفضاء.
Yes, absolutely. And there are companies now that are doing exactly that. They're going to take your money and let you go into basically a big parabola. You'll get about 15 minutes.